This is part of my premium course, so if you like this video, be sure to check out usefullaravelpackages.com. Okay, let's take a look at Laravel Airlock. Airlock provides a lightweight authentication system for single-page applications. Now, we already have Passport, which is a full OAuth implementation, but if you only need authentication within your single-page web app, then Airlock is the better choice. You can also use Airlock for personal access tokens and mobile application authentication, but in this video, I'm just going to be focusing on using Airlock to authenticate your single-page web apps. So I have an example here, and I am making use of Tailwind UI because I want to try it out. And the way I have it set up is I have two separate applications, one for the front end and one for the back end. So what you're looking at here is the front end made with Vue CLI, and the back end has no UI, but here it is running in my browser, and this has Airlock installed. Now, for authenticating single-page web apps, Airlock uses Laravel's built-in cookie-based session authentication services. This makes it more secure and has CSRF protection, and is also protected against cross-site scripting attacks. So let me just show it to you working here. So there is built-in auth here. So if I just put in something random that doesn't work, then you'll have that message. And this is coming from the server. And if you want to log in, just provide the proper credentials, and we will be redirected to the dashboard. And you can see this is coming from the server. And you can also sign out. So there's also guards in place. So if you press dashboard here, we can't go to it. Now, if you look up here, if you notice the domain, you'll see that the front end lives on a subdomain and the back end lives on the top level domain. So this is really important. Both apps have to be on the same top level domain. You also can't get it working on the localhost domain because of the way cookies work for localhost. So again, very important, both apps have to be on the same domain. And I'll show you how to set that up for both the front end and the back end. Okay, so I went ahead and made a brand new Vue CLI application. And the only thing I've done is added these Tailwind UI components. So I replaced the homepage with this login component. And I also have one for the dashboard here. And obviously, I also set up this new route for the dashboard. So if you want to look at the code, I have this home route, which I replaced with the Tailwind UI component. And I made this new dashboard component here, which is this. And I set up the router accordingly, which is in here. So the first thing I want to do is set up the subdomain for our front end. So just like I showed you in the example, we need to put this on the same domain as our backend. So right now it's running in localhost, and like I said, it doesn't work in localhost. So we have to find a way to put this on a real subdomain. So I did some Googling and I found this article, and this is exactly what we need. So it says it runs typically on localhost 8080, which is what's happening here. But if you add a vue.config.js file, and if you add this in there, with the subdomain that you want, then we can use that subdomain after we make some changes to our hosts file. So let's go ahead and add this. So vue.config.js right here. Okay, and space that in. And the host that I want is going to be, like I said, I'm going to put this on a subdomain. So app airlock example.test. So our backend is going to be running on airlock example.test. I haven't created that yet. And our front end is this code, and we want this to be on a subdomain. So that's the domain I want. Save that. And let me just stop my npm run serve here. And now we have to edit our hosts file, and we just have to enter this entry into it. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's do sudo vim /etc/hosts. Okay, and we can add that entry in. As you can see, you can see the example one I had earlier. And let's just add this. So it's going to be app.airlock example.test. So app.airlock example.test. Okay, let's save that. And now if we just run npm run serve, you'll see that it's now hosted on that domain. So let's try it out. And there you see it is running on this domain, and it still works on the port, so that's okay. So if I go to that, there we go. Cool. So let me just close this one out. And we can close this too. Okay, now let's go ahead and create the backend Laravel application. So I'm going to use the Laravel installer. So Laravel new, and I'm going to name it Airlock example. And I want Laravel 7, which should be out in the next few days at the time of this recording. So let's add --dev. Okay, let's go into that. Airlock example. And let's open this up in VS Code as well. So since I'm using Valet, this should open in the airlock example.test domain. And it does. Cool. So now both our front end and back end live on the same domain. Cool. So let's finally set up Airlock. So the first thing I want to do is just compose or require it. So let's go ahead and do that. And I also want to add the Laravel UI scaffolding, because we're going to make use of Laravel's default auth services for logging in and logging out and stuff like that. And I also want the 2.0 version. Okay, that's done. Let's go ahead and PHP rs in UI view. I don't think I have to do this, but I'll do it anyways because we're using a totally different front end for this. Okay, what's next? Next is to publish the config. Let's go ahead and do that. Okay, and this also comes with migrations, but that's more for the tokens, but we'll migrate anyways. And there is a config for Airlock as well. So let's go ahead and migrate. Actually, I have to set up my database first. So I already have a database set up, so I just have to change my env file. And the database is just the same name as the project, so Airlock example. And if I did that right, PHP artisan migrate should work. Okay, so as you see, we have this one for personal access tokens, which Airlock created. Okay, what's next? So we have to add this middleware. So ensure front-end requests are stateful in our app HTTP kernel. So let's go ahead and do that. App HTTP kernel. Let's go ahead and use that. And let's grab this and put it in our API routes. API middleware, I mean, right here. Okay. And what's next? So this is for API token auth, which we are not going to look at in this video. We want the single page application authentication. Okay. So this we already did. We did this already. Okay, now we have to look at CORS and cookies. So it says you should ensure that your application's CORS config is returning true for access control allow credentials. So in Laravel 7, the Laravel CORS package is baked into the framework. So if you look at composer.json, you'll see fruitcake Laravel CORS. Cool. And if you look at the config, you'll see one for CORS as well. So let's go ahead and go here. And we have to set supports credential to true. Okay. What else? It says we have to let Axios have this with credentials default. So this is within our front end. So let's install Axios on our front end. So let me stop this, npm install Axios. And while that's going, let me just go back to my front end here. So this is my front end, and within here, we'll just import Axios. So import Axios from Axios, and then let's put that default in there right here. Oops, I thought I copied it. Copy, paste. Okay. And I'm going to save that, and let's run serve again. Okay, so back to our backend. What's next here? It says we should ensure my application session cookie domain configuration supports any subdomain of your root domain. So if you go to config session, you'll see a key for domain. So let's go there, config session. And if you look for domain here, you'll see that there is an environment variable for session domain. So let's go ahead and do that. So .env, is there one here already? There is not. So let's put it right here. Session domain equals, and like it says, we want the .domain.com. So this will enable all subdomains. So let's do that. And our domain is airlock example.test. Okay. And I forgot one step here. If you read this, then we have to set this stateful key in our airlock config. And what this does is determines which domain is allowed to store cookies. So let's go to our config airlock. Where is it? Up here. And you'll see here, there is a key for stateful, and you can add multiple domains to this env variable. So right now it has localhost as default, but we can change that. So let's go ahead and go back to our environment file. Let's put it underneath here so it's close to the session. And this should be the domain that the front end is running on. So in our example, it's going to be app.airlock.example.test. Okay. And now I think everything's set up now. Hopefully that's correct. And now we can start making requests from our front end. So what we need to do is make a request to this endpoint. And what this will do is set the cookie on the client. And once this is done, then we can make a request to the standard login route, and then we can log in from there. So let's go ahead and try this. I actually think there is a step I forgot, but let's just try this and then we'll see the errors that we get. So back to our front end. So I am in the login view, or the home view in our case. And we want to make a new method for logging in. So let's just add a methods key. And we move this up. Let's call it login. And we can paste that in. Okay. And let me try something here. So this doesn't have the base URL, so we can add that in the defaults as well. So axios.defaults.base URL. And this is going to be http airlock example.test. Okay. And let's just see if we're getting anything here. So console log response. Okay. So save that. Is my server running? Okay, it is. So let's go back to it and let's see if we get anything. Actually, I forgot to use this login method in the sign out button, or sign in button. So add click equals login. Okay, so let's try this out. Let's go to our front end, open DevTools, and let me just refresh here. And let me just get rid of these errors. So yeah, these errors are because there's no variable for these email, password, and password, just because I pasted in the completed thing. So what is that? It's just the V model on these inputs. So we're going to make use of this anyway, so let's might as well put that in there. So I have one for email and password, I believe. So let's put that in some state here. So data, let's return an object for email, make it empty, and password. Okay, let's save that, and let's see if those errors are gone. So let me just refresh this. Okay, cool. So let me just make this a bit smaller. So let's go ahead and try signing in. So there's some browser validation here, so we're going to have to... Actually, no, the request went through. And if you see here, it's saying we're getting CORS errors here. So there seems to be some sort of misconfiguration in our cores. And I was stuck on this for a while until I found the solution. And that is to go back to our cores config in our backend. So let me just go back to our backend, go to cores. And we have to allow the paths that we want cores to be available on. So in this case, it's going to be this airlock / CSRF cookie endpoint that we're trying to hit. And we also have to make sure that we set it for login and logout, because we're going to be using those as well. And everything else is going to be from within API / whatever endpoint. So that's good. So now if I save that, hopefully this will work. So let me refresh this. And let's hit sign in. And there we go. This should set a cookie on the client. And if you look at application, if you look at cookies here, then we see we have some cookies in here. Awesome. So now we can make a request to the login endpoint, which already exists in our Laravel application because we set up the auth scaffolding. So let's go ahead and do that. So back to our front end here, and let's go into here. So we don't need this anymore. And now from within here, we want to make another request to the login endpoint. That's going to be a post request to /login. And we want to pass in some information there. So that's going to be the email and the password. So email is this.email because we have a V model on it. And password is this password. Okay. And let's call it then on this as well. Let's call it response to. And it's just console log response to. So I have no users in my database yet, but let's just see if we're getting the correct error. So let me refresh this. Let's go to console and just type in whatever here. Okay, sign in. And 422 is the correct error. So if you look at network, look at 422, if you look at preview or the response, and if you look at the errors here, you'll see we're getting these credentials do not match our records error, which is the correct error. So now if I make an actual user, let's see if that works. So I'm going to go into my Laravel app and let's go to /register and make an actual user. So the CSS is not working because I didn't install CSS, but that's fine. This endpoint should still work. So let's make one for me. Say andre@andre.com. Password is password. Password is password. Let's register. Okay, so now there should be a user. Did that work? Let's check my database. Okay, so it did. So now let's try our front end again and see if we get a different message for a successful user. So back to here, back to here. And let me just clear out my cookies here. So application, cookies, let me just delete all these. Okay. And let me just refresh this. So let's try with that user we just created. Let me go to console. And with the correct password, sign in. And there we go. We are getting a 204, which is the correct response. And the appropriate cookies are set on the client. So now we should be able to hit the endpoint. So if we go to the backend again, routes API. Oh yeah, we have to do this as well. So this is the default for routes API, but for Airlock, we have to change the middleware to something different. If you look at the docs here, I think it's down here somewhere. Right here, we have to set the middleware to be Auth Airlock instead of Auth API. So let me just comment this out and set it to Airlock. Cool. So after the cookie is set correctly for a successful login, we should be able to hit this endpoint. So here's what I'm going to do. I am going to hit this endpoint in the dashboard route of our front end. So let's go back to our dashboard view. Let's go down here. And let's make a mounted hook here. Mounted. Okay, and let's go back to home for a second, just grab this. So I just want to Axios get. Okay, and the endpoint is /API/user. And I'm just gonna grab this as well. You definitely should make Axios available globally, but for this demo, I'll just duplicate that code. And let's not forget the import statement as well. Okay. Cool. And let's just console log the response. Okay. So my cookie is set already. So let me just refresh this. And if I did this correctly, if I hit dashboard, then the user information from the backend should show here. And it does not. Let's try everything again. So I'm going to go back to home. And I am going to refresh. I'm going to delete my cookies. And I'm going to try to log in again. Okay, so andre@andre.com, password. Let's check if this works. Okay, and if I hit dashboard, will this work? No, it doesn't. So something's wrong. Okay, so earlier you saw me add this click handler for the button, but I forgot that I already had the form submit handler up here on the form. So it was making the request twice to receive the cookie, which caused some issues. So I removed this. So I was only receiving one cookie. And now that should work. So for some reason, I can't get it working in a normal browser tab. So I'm going to open up an incognito tab. And also, if you're having issues, be sure to clear out the sessions. So in this folder, storage framework sessions, as you can see, I have one in here. So I'm just going to do rm star and say yes. Okay. So now in my incognito, let's go ahead and try this. So there should be no cookies here because it's in incognito tab. So let's try a proper login. Let's sign in. Okay, we get this and it only shows once. If you saw earlier, it showed twice because I had those two events on the form, one for the button and one for the form. And now if I go to dashboard, let's see if this works. And it does. Awesome. So now we're getting the information for our user here, the logged in user. Cool. So let's add the name here, or we can put the email in there. Doesn't matter. It's up to you. Let's go to our dashboard view and let's make a piece of state here for the name. And it's return name, empty string. And let's do this dot name is response. So response.data is the user object. And we'll grab the email. And in the template, let's go ahead and change that right here. Let's put name in here. Okay, so now this should work. Cool. So let's go ahead and add logging out. So whenever the user wants to log out, we have to destroy the session. So just like logging in, we're going to make use of Laravel's built-in login logout route. So let's go ahead and do that. So let's look for the button here. So it says sign out. Sign out. So be careful because there's actually two here. There's one for the mobile view and there's one for the desktop view. So this is the desktop one. So at click equals logout. Let's go ahead and make that method right here. Let's do methods logout. And we're just going to post to logout. It's a post route. /logout. Let's do that. Then response And I'm just gonna use the router here and go home. So I like using named routes, both in Laravel and Vue. So I'm just gonna do name home. Okay. And I'm also gonna do the same thing in our home view once we log in. So where's that? Right here. Instead of console logging. And this is called dashboard. Okay, so let's try logging out and then let's try logging in again. So I'm logged in right now. Cool. And if I hit sign out, this should sign me out and redirect me back to the home page. And it does, awesome. So let's try if it redirects from here. So again, it's andre.com, password, let's press enter, and everything is working. Awesome. Okay, the next thing I want to take care of is route guards or navigation guards. So now we're logged in, so we shouldn't be able to access the home route, but we still can. And the opposite case applies too. So when we're logged out, so let's log out here, we don't want to be able to access the dashboard view. So this is where you would use something like Vuex to hold some sort of global state, but I don't want to make this lesson about Vuex. So what I'm going to do is just store a piece of global state in local storage, and all that does is tell us if we're logged in or not. So let's go ahead and do that. So back to our code. So before we push to the dashboard after we successfully log in, let's set a new variable in local storage, set item, and let's call it is logged in. And unfortunately, local storage doesn't support booleans, but I'm just going to put the string true here, and that should be enough for us. And we're just going to destroy it upon logging out. So let's go to dashboard, and here I'm just going to delete it from local storage. So local storage that remove item, and we don't have to give that. Cool. Okay, so let's verify that this works. So let me go back to home and let's log in again. So andre@andre.com. Okay, and now let's check the local storage. Okay, so there it is. Cool. So if you go into the docs for Vue router, and if you go into route meta fields, this is how you would set guards. So you need to set a meta object on the routes you want to protect, and then we have to check here. So this is sort of like middleware in Laravel. So let's go ahead and do this. Let's add a meta field to the routes we want to protect. So let's go to our router here. So right here. And we only want to set it on home and for dashboard as well. So meta field. So for home, we want to make sure the visitor is not logged in. So let's call it requires visitor. And this one is okay with requires auth. Cool. And about is fine for both. So we don't need to put a meta field on that. And now I am going to grab this piece of code here, and this just checks the meta fields and make sure you are logged in or not. And we added that piece of state in local storage, so we can check that way. So I'm just going to put this code in main.js. As you can see, the router is being imported here, so we can just put it here. You can obviously extract this to a separate file if you want. So if the route we're trying to visit requires auth, then we have to check if we're logged in, and we'll make a method here called isLoggedIn. Actually, it should be if you're not logged in. Then we want to redirect where. And I like using names, like I said. We want to redirect to the login page. So that's just home in my case. And I'm going to do the same for the other case. So I'm just going to grab this and put an else if right here. So it should be else if. And it should be requires visitor. this should be logged in. And this should be dashboard. So if you're logged in, then just redirect to the dashboard. So all we have to do is make this method, and I'm going to put it right here. And all we're doing is checking the local storage, if it exists. Logged in. So all we have to do is return local storage .get item is logged in. And if it's there, then that means we're logged in. If it's not, then we're not logged in. Okay, so let's try this. Okay, so right now I am logged in. So if I try going home, that won't work because I'm logged in. We can even try setting the URL, and it's going to redirect to the dashboard. And let's try the other case as well. So if I'm here to try going to the dashboard, that won't work. And even if I try this, that won't work as well. Awesome. So one last thing I want to do is just some validation here, which shows the server error if there is one. So let's go quickly do that. I'm going to go to my home route, and let's put a new piece of state here called error message. And let's set it to empty. And let's just see how it's going to look. So I'm going to put it above the first input. So that should be right here. And let's just do text red 500. Let's make it small and let's give it a margin bottom. And see, error goes here. See how that looks. Okay, looks good. And let's just say error message here. Error message, and let's just put a VIF on this. So VIF equals error message. Okay, and that won't show right now because there is none. Cool. And down here, we just have to catch the error and set that piece of state if there is one. So catch error, and let's just console log the error response.data to see what we're working with. Okay, and just try logging in with something that doesn't exist. Cool. And there you see, well, this message isn't very descriptive, but the message that we want is within this errors key, and it has all the errors for each field here. So I kind of wish this message was just the first message returned here, because oftentimes you just want to display the first message, or maybe if there's another key here that had like first message, that would be nice, but we have to go through all of this object and array syntax and just grab the first error here. So let's do this really quickly. So I want the key for that first message. So I'm going to do object.keys. So error.response.data.errors. And I want the first one. So that's going to be 0. So that's just going to be email, the string email. And now we just want to set the error message to error.response.data.errors. So we want that key, and we want the first field, which is just the error message. So if I did that correctly, that should just display the first error message. Test.com, password. There we go, cool. And if you want, you can clear the password, but I'm just gonna leave that. And you can obviously polish this up. You can add like a loading spinner here, and so on. So one more time, let's log in correctly. And Airlock takes care of setting cookies. And we just have to make sure that our apps live on the same domain and set up Airlock accordingly. And then we can log in to our protected routes. So yeah, I hope that was a good overview of how to use Airlock to authenticate your single page applications. And I hope this was a good example using Vue. Please like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already done so. Thanks for watching, guys. See you in the next one. Okay, thanks. Bye.